Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, and specifically regarding relations between parents and their children. Parents naturally love their children, but what happens many times because the parents love them so much and want to give them and do everything for them, what happens is that they get the opposite attitude in return. Many times I saw mothers with their daughters that because they give so much and want so much for the daughters, what they get in return are outbursts of rage, accusations, something really hard to look at. And it's very sad because the mother, she really loves her daughter and she wants to give to her. And we wanted to really find out what's the right way to love. How could it be that love and hatred sometimes come together? That you try to give love and what you get in return from the child is an attitude of hatred. How does that happen? It's really at the essence of nature because the will to enjoy, the desire to enjoy, it's a raw desire to enjoy. It exists prior to matter, where matter, substance, later on is built upon it, upon the will to receive. Electrons, protons, neutrons, fields of forces, these are all expressions of the will to enjoy, either by rejecting each other or by attracting one another. Two forces, the force of rejection and the force of attraction. This is what exists in nature on all levels, starting with the subatomic level and up to galaxies and the entire universe, which is parallel to love and hatred. Yeah, and also later on. That's in the still, the way it all accumulates into crystals and so on and so forth, and molecules, molecules of the animate world, and you have growth where it emits and receives and gives, and there's already a kind of inclusion between the parts. It's not like electrons and protons that only connect between them mechanically, but there's also a reproduction as a result. The truth, it also exists in the inanimate world, but we better see it in the vegetative world. It's more conspicuous. And then in the animate world, you can even see it more, the force of rejection and attraction, which is also expressed in emotions, feelings. You can very clearly see it on animals, even though that it happens instinctively. A mother towards her offspring, suppose. And also among people, it also happens instinctively. But with animals, because it's only instinctively within a certain framework, so there is a limit to the time that the offspring is next to his mother, and then it leaves, and there's no longer any connection. Meaning, nature controls them in a way that, to a certain extent, till a certain date, suppose, till a certain period, they have, let's call it, ties of love between them, and beyond that, suddenly it stops. That's it. They don't even know each other anymore. A lioness can meet her offsprings in some time, which is beyond the period that she raised them, and she no longer knows them, and they don't know her that much. And there are also different cases. There are like herds of elephants. These are big families and so on. Yeah, there are these and those. And among people, there's a problem with this because we belong to the animate world, but we have an addition, and the addition isn't that great. It gives us the ability to develop, but it also confuses us a lot. The opportunity of coming out from the boundaries of nature, beyond the instincts, where nature doesn't operate us necessarily, but gives us the ability to develop and bring ourselves to have control over our lives in a certain aspect within certain boundaries. And it's especially expressed in rejection and attraction, love and hate. And we don't know how to correctly use it. And love and hate, these are the two fundamental main forces that is a result of which, or upon which, all of life is built on. So if we're talking about these two forces, we have to know how to correctly use them within the limits and in the right ways, both to attract, bring closer the beneficial and distance the harmful, and to know exactly what's beneficial and what's harmful, and this way to use these two forces that we call hate and love. So, if you're asking about kids, there it's especially. It's also between the sexes, which precedes giving birth to children. So, it's the same with respect to children, because nature doesn't give us the limits and doesn't precisely aim us to hate or love, we have to restrain ourselves, the parents. What is the right way to treat our children, both in an attitude of rejection and also attraction? Or let's call it hatred and love, but it's not exactly. And here, we really have to first of all know how to correctly use it. Aside from the wisdom of Kabbalah, I saw no other method that really understands what it's all about, because the method of the wisdom of Kabbalah comes from the foundation of nature, and therefore by this wisdom we can understand how should we relate to our offsprings in a balanced, good way, in the right way, and correctly raise them and aim them to use these two forces. It's called the right and the left line, the attraction and rejection. So they will also relate correctly to everything in life according to the examples that we give them, to relations with other people and nature and everything. And if not, we see what's going on in the world. People don't know where are the boundaries of love and hate and everything. And altogether, how can we take these desires, these urges as reins and start controlling our life? It's very hard for us because these urges, they come from the foundation of nature, and in a person, because he's free, because he's not controlled by nature instinctively, he has freedom, therefore he harms himself and others. Whereas these two forces have to be balanced, meaning rejection and attraction, or hatred and love. I'm not afraid of using the word hatred against love, because I have to show my children that I'm treating them by the middle line. It is an attitude in which both love and hatred are correctly included, and one can't be without the other. And therefore, utter love that has no limits is not good, because it evokes in a child spontaneously rejection and hatred. Why? Because he doesn't know how to respond to it. Actually, when a child responds to this limitlessly warm and loving attitude of his parents, the child actually wants to feel the limit, and therefore he treats them offensively, disrespectfully, aggressively, because the child wants to feel where does the love end? Because without a limit, we can't even feel it. And it also says so in our sources that everything has to have a limit. Spare the rod and spoil the child, and so on. Meaning, we're not talking about beatings here or something, but we're talking about the right kind of control, reign, that you really have to control the educational process. And also, vice versa. If we're all the time putting pressure and pressure and pressure, and we're not on the middle line, we don't have the right balance between rejection and attraction, the children also don't understand what's going on and they're demanding a good attitude. And also, in this respect, they have different responses. And in short, what we learned with respect to education, which is what the wisdom of Kabbalah especially deals with, is how to relate to every gender, species, creature, and every state, and so on. Meaning we get the right guidance of how to build ourselves. The wisdom of Kabbalah speaks about the particular correction of a person for him to correctly relate to each part of creation, especially people, relatives, strangers, children, the whole of humanity, and each person in particular. And therefore, all in all, the wisdom of Kabbalah teaches us how to love correctly.